Caleb Turner had lived his whole life on the wide, sun-baked ranch land that stretched out beyond the small town of Red Creek. Every direction he looked showed the same picture: dry grass, empty fields, and fences that needed repair. The Turner Ranch had once been a place full of life, with busy workers, strong cattle, and the warm laughter of his late wife drifting through the air. Now it felt quiet and tired, like the land itself was holding its breath, unsure of how much longer it could survive. For months, the drought had refused to loosen its grip. The streams had dried to thin, muddy lines, and the ponds had shrunk until even the animals looked confused, wandering in circles as if hoping water would appear by magic. Caleb spent long days trying to stretch what little feed and water they had left, moving cattle from one dry patch to another, praying for rain. The sky, however, remained stubbornly empty. The ranch's debts grew with each passing week. Letters from the bank stacked up on the small wooden table inside the house. Letters Caleb didn't want to open, but couldn't ignore either. He always opened them late at night, after finishing chores, when the house was silent except for the ticking old clock on the wall. He would read the words slowly, his heart sinking at each line, telling him the same thing. Time is running out. He had some help on the ranch, but not enough. The workers were loyal, but they had families of their own, and Caleb struggled to pay them on time. He hated disappointing people, but the truth was plain. One man could not run such a large ranch alone, especially in such hard times. It was during one of those late nights staring at bank letters that he finally made a decision he had tried to avoid for months. He needed help, not just with chores, but with running the house, organizing the accounts, and simply keeping life steady. His late wife, Sarah, had been the heart of the ranch. Without her, the house felt cold, the meals felt rushed, and the days blend into each other with no warmth in between. He needed someone who could bring order back, maybe even hope. But in Red Creek, eligible women were few, and those who lived there already had their lives set. Caleb wasn't the kind of man to walk into town asking strangers to take on the responsibility of a ranch wife. The idea alone made him uneasy. He wasn't looking for romance, not after losing Sarah. What he needed was companionship, someone kind, dependable, willing to share a simple but hard-working life. That was when he remembered something one of the ranch hands had mentioned months earlier: mail-order brides. The idea had sounded strange then. It still felt strange now. But after thinking it over for days, Caleb finally wrote a letter, a simple, honest one, explaining who he was and what life on the ranch was like. He didn't try to pretend things were perfect. He even mentioned the drought. He sent it through an agency that helped match widows and single women from faraway places with men who needed wives. He wrote the final line of the letter slowly. "If you come here, I will do my best to give you a home full of respect and honesty. I cannot promise an easy life, but I can promise a peaceful one." Weeks passed. Caleb tried to push the thought of the letter away. But part of him worried every day. What if no one answered? What if the only replies came from people who weren't truly ready for ranch life? The uncertainty made him restless. Then one warm, dusty afternoon, a letter finally arrived. It was written in neat, careful handwriting. The return address was from a place far across the ocean, a small European village he had never heard of. Inside was a letter from a woman named Elena Markova. Elena wrote with a gentle tone, expressing that she had seen his notice and felt moved by it. She explained that she came from a humble family, had lost much during recent hardships, and wanted a chance to start a new life somewhere stable and honest. She shared that she could cook, sew, clean, and manage a household. Her words were thoughtful but modest. She offered no grand promises, only a willingness to work hard and learn whatever was needed. She also mentioned that she had experience around farm animals, though she did not go into detail. Caleb read her letter several times. Something about her writing felt sincere. She didn't try to impress him with flowery descriptions or exaggerated talents. She simply sounded like someone who wanted a fresh beginning. After a few more letters were exchanged, both sides agreed. Elena would come to Red Creek. The day she arrived, the sky was hazy with dust, the wind carrying the warm, dry smell of summer. Caleb stood outside the small station, feeling unusually nervous. He was a quiet man by nature, never one for long speeches, but he found himself rehearsing simple phrases in his mind. "Welcome. I hope the trip wasn't too hard. The ranch is simple, but I hope you'll feel at home." A steam train pulled in with a loud hiss. People stepped off, gathering luggage and greeting relatives. Then he saw her, and immediately understood why she stood out. Elena was small and slender, with dark eyes that carried a kind of gentle alertness. She looked around the station carefully, taking in the dusty road, the open sky, and the few wooden buildings with quiet curiosity. She carried only one suitcase, old but neatly kept. When her gaze finally met Caleb's, she gave a small, polite smile, nervous but genuine. "You must be Mr. Turner," she said in a soft accent. "Yes," he replied, removing his hat respectfully. "Please call me Caleb." Their first exchange was simple, but he immediately sensed something quiet and thoughtful about her. There was a grace in the way she moved, a calmness in how she observed the world around her. She wasn't loud or demanding. She looked like someone used to adapting, someone who had learned to stay steady no matter the situation. As they walked toward the wagon, Elena took in everything: the stretch of land beyond the town, the open fields, the far-off cattle moving slowly like dark dots against the pale earth. "It is different from my home," she said softly. "Very wide, very quiet." "I hope it won't feel too lonely," Caleb answered, unsure whether she would find comfort or sadness in such silence. "I think sometimes wide places help the heart breathe," she replied gently. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, but the words stayed with him. The ride back to the ranch took nearly an hour. Caleb pointed out landmarks: the riverbed that used to be fuller, the small schoolhouse children attended, the old windmill that still creaked during windy nights. Elena listened attentively, asking simple but thoughtful questions. She didn't ask about luxury or comfort. Instead, she asked whether the cattle were healthy, how many workers lived on the property, and how far the next ranch was. Her questions showed practicality, not fear. When they reached the ranch house, she stepped down and looked around quietly. The house was clean, though plain. The porch boards creaked, and the paint had faded under the harsh sun. But Elena didn't look disappointed. She simply nodded, as if accepting it as a place she could belong. Inside, Caleb showed her the kitchen, the dining area, and the room that would be hers. She ran her hand over the wooden counter, the worn but neatly arranged shelves, and the small quilt folded at the end of the bed. "You have kept the home with care," she said. He shook his head. "I've done my best, but Sarah, my late wife, she kept it better. I'm afraid things slipped over time." Elena bowed her head slightly, acknowledging the quiet grief behind his words. She didn't pry or ask questions. She simply said, "I will do my best to care for this place." Caleb felt a strange sense of relief, though he didn't fully understand why. During the first evening, they shared a simple meal of baked beans, bread, and stew. Elena offered to help cook, but Caleb insisted she rest after her long journey. She agreed, though he noticed she watched him closely, perhaps trying to learn how things were done in the household. Their conversation remained gentle: where she came from, how life in her village had changed, what drew her to start over in a distant land. She didn't speak of her past in detail, only mentioning that her family had once lived near farms where she helped with daily tasks. There was something unspoken in her voice, something she chose not to explain yet. After dinner, Caleb stepped outside to check the animals one last time. When he returned, he found Elena quietly washing the dishes, even though he had told her to rest. "You don't have to do that," he said. She smiled softly. "I like to be useful. It helps me feel settled." Her answer surprised him, but he didn't argue. That night, as he blew out the lantern and settled into his room, Caleb reflected on the day. Elena was polite, gentle, and carried herself with careful grace. But something about her felt deeper, like she had more experience, more knowledge, more strength than she revealed. He didn't know what secrets her past held. He didn't know yet the hidden talent she carried or how much it would one day change his life and the future of the ranch. All he knew was that for the first time in many months, he felt a small spark of hope, quiet, but real, growing inside him. And he didn't fully understand why. Caleb woke early the next morning, as he always did. The sky was still dim, touched with the soft colors of sunrise, and the cool air felt fresh before the heat of the day arrived. He stepped outside, expecting to begin his usual chores, feeding the horses, checking the water troughs, and preparing the day's tasks for the ranch hands. But something unexpected caught his eye. Elena was already outside. She stood near the small garden patch behind the house, carefully removing dry leaves from the plants. Her dress was simple, and her hair tied neatly back. Though she had arrived only the evening before, she worked with quiet focus, as if she had lived there for years. Caleb paused for a moment, surprised. Most people, after such a long journey, would still be resting. Yet here she was, in the cool morning light, tending to the garden as calmly as if it were a routine she'd done her entire life. When she noticed him, she gave a shy smile. "Good morning." "You're up early?" he said, walking closer. "You should rest more. The trip must have been tiring." She brushed dirt from her hands. "I slept well. The air here is peaceful. Working helps me feel at home." Her answer reminded him of the night before, when she insisted on doing the dishes. Perhaps keeping busy brought her comfort. Caleb nodded and offered to show her around the ranch, thinking it would be better for her to see everything before deciding where she wanted to help. She agreed, and they began walking toward the barns. The sun slowly climbed higher, spreading warm light across the fields. Dust shimmered lightly in the air. The ranch hands were just beginning their day, and some of them glanced curiously at Elena, though politely. Caleb introduced her. She greeted everyone with a gentle nod and a soft, "Good morning," her accent giving the words a slightly musical tone. The men returned her greeting respectfully. Though the work was tough and the days long, they were decent people. As they moved past the barns, a sudden loud neigh broke through the quiet. One of the younger ranch hands, Tommy, struggled with a big brown horse that tossed its head, clearly unhappy. Tommy pulled the lead rope, but the horse danced sideways, snorting in frustration. "That must be Rusty again," Caleb said with a sigh. "He's been nervous since last month. Doesn't like anyone handling him." Tommy laughed nervously. "He doesn't like anything except eating." Caleb stepped forward, ready to help calm the horse. But before he could, Elena touched his arm lightly. "May I try?" she asked. Her voice was steady, not bold, but confident in a quiet way. Caleb hesitated. Rusty wasn't dangerous, but he was unpredictable, and Elena was new, small, and unfamiliar with the ranch routine. "You don't have to," Caleb said gently. "Rusty's stubborn. He isn't easy to manage." Elena smiled softly. "I understand, but may I try?" Caleb studied her calm face. Something in her eyes, steady and observant, made him nod. "All right, but be careful." Rusty jerked again as she approached, his hooves scraping the ground in irritation. The ranch hands watched with interest, some folding their arms, expecting the horse to resist. But Elena didn't reach for the rope or try to touch him right away. She stood a few steps away, her hands relaxed at her sides, and simply watched Rusty with quiet attention. She murmured something softly under her breath, words in a language no one there recognized. Rusty flicked his ears toward her voice, even though he kept shifting impatiently. Then she made a low, calming sound. It was gentle, steady, almost like a soothing hum. She didn't raise her voice or step forward too quickly. She let the horse come to her energy instead of pushing her own toward him. The horse stopped tossing his head. He blinked, lowered his neck slightly, and released a long breath, a sign of relaxation. The ranch hands froze. Caleb felt his eyebrows rise. Elena slowly reached out her hand, not to grab, but simply to let Rusty smell her fingers. The horse stretched his neck forward, sniffed gently, and then allowed her to touch his nose. She stroked his forehead in slow, even motions. Rusty stood quietly, his earlier frustration melting away like it had never existed. Tommy's mouth dropped open. "What in the world?" Elena smiled at Rusty, continuing the soft sounds. "He is not a stubborn horse," she said quietly. "Just unsure. He needs a calm hand, not a firm one." Caleb stepped closer, amazed. "Where did you learn that?" Her eyes lowered, and she gave a humble shrug. "Back home? My family worked near many farms. My father taught me to understand animals. We learned their moods, their fears, their small signals." "You never told me you had training like that," Caleb said gently. "I didn't think it was important," she replied. "It is simply something I grew up with." But her modest words didn't match the skill they had just witnessed. Caleb knew people born and raised on ranches who couldn't calm Rusty like that. Elena's hidden talent wasn't just basic experience. It was something rare. After a moment, she handed the rope to Tommy. "Try again, slowly," she advised. Tommy, still speechless, did as she said. Rusty obeyed him gently this time, walking without resistance. The ranch hands exchanged looks of surprise. Caleb felt a quiet ripple of hope move through him. For the first time in a long while, something had gone right. Something unexpected, but good. As they continued the tour, the ranch hands whispered among themselves, not unkindly, but impressed. Elena, however, didn't appear proud. She carried herself with the same gentle humility, as though calming a frustrated horse were nothing more than sweeping a floor or folding laundry. When they reached the chicken coop, a few hens clucked loudly, flapping their wings in alarm at the newcomers. Elena knelt down near them and made a series of soft, rhythmic clucks in return. The birds stilled almost immediately, pecking calmly at the ground again. Caleb watched with fascination. "You really do understand animals." She looked up with a shy smile. "Animals speak, but not with words. We must listen differently." Caleb felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. Admiration, perhaps, or simply relief that someone understood the ranch's living creatures so naturally. As the day passed, Elena continued observing everything with sharp eyes. She noticed that one horse limped slightly, pointing it out before Caleb had seen it. She spotted that the cattle's water trough near the west fence was running low. She gently redirected a lost chicken back to its coop with a soft whistle. She wasn't loud, but her presence seemed to bring a calm energy wherever she went. At midday, Caleb invited her to rest in the shade near the old oak tree. He brought her a cup of cool water. "You've had a busy day already," he said. "I like learning the place," she replied. "And the animals. They are honest. They tell you how they feel." Caleb chuckled softly. "More honest than people sometimes." Elena looked down at her hands. "People carry many stories inside them," she said quietly. "Sometimes stories they are not ready to share." Her words made Caleb pause. He wondered what stories she carried. What had she faced before coming here? What had shaped her quiet strength, her patience, her deep understanding of living creatures? He didn't ask. Not yet. He sensed she would tell him in her own time. The afternoon grew warmer, and Elena helped prepare lunch back at the house. She cooked with simple confidence, even though the ingredients and stove were unfamiliar. The meal came out well: warm bread, vegetable stew, and tea with a hint of honey. As they ate, Caleb found himself relaxing more than he had in months. The house no longer felt quite so empty. After lunch, Elena insisted on helping with the horses again. The ranch hands welcomed her presence now, eager to see what else she could do. Throughout the afternoon, she demonstrated small techniques: how to approach a nervous horse from an angle instead of straight on, how to move slowly so the animal didn't feel threatened, how to use calm breathing to steady both handler and horse. She didn't claim to be a teacher, but the workers listened with genuine interest. Even Caleb learned things he hadn't known. By sunset, the ranch felt different, not just because the animals were calmer, but because Caleb sensed a quiet shift in the air, like a door had opened to possibilities he hadn't imagined before. After dinner, when the day's work was done, Elena stepped outside to watch the sky grow soft with evening colors. Caleb joined her, standing a respectful distance away. "You were remarkable today," he said sincerely. Elena smiled shyly. "I only did what I know." "You did more than that," he replied. "You helped more than you realize." She looked out over the fields. This land, it feels tired, but also hopeful, as if it wants to grow again, if given the chance. Caleb nodded, touched by her words. "I hope you're right." A gentle breeze moved through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and distant earth. For a long moment, they stood together in quiet understanding. Elena didn't just come as a mail-order bride. She had come with something unexpected, a gift, a rare one. And though neither of them fully understood it yet, that hidden talent would soon change the future of the ranch in ways Caleb never imagined. The days that followed grew into a steady rhythm, smoother than anything the Turner Ranch had seen in years. The morning sun still rose over dry fields, and the wind still carried dust across the fences. But something in the air had changed. The workers felt it. Caleb felt it. Even the animals seemed to sense it. And all of it began with Elena. Her presence on the ranch was like a quiet, calming breeze. Nothing loud or commanding, but steady and reassuring. Something that made people work with more patience and animals behave with more trust. She woke early each day, sometimes before Caleb, ready to learn, observe, and help in any way she could. At first, Caleb thought her skills with animals were only a small gift she had picked up from her childhood. But the more time he spent watching her, the more he realized he had underestimated her talent. It wasn't ordinary. It wasn't beginner's luck or something she did by accident. Elena had a way, soft, natural, and deeply intuitive, that made even the most stubborn animals find comfort. One morning, as the sun painted the sky with warm gold, Elena joined Caleb in the horse barn. One of the ranch's most valuable horses, a tall black stallion named Midnight, had been restless for weeks. He didn't like being groomed, refused his saddle at times, and often paced the stalls as if searching for something that wasn't there. Caleb had tried everything: different saddles, new routines, extra rest. But the stallion remained uneasy. When Elena approached the horse, he stamped his hooves and swung his head back and forth. Caleb warned her gently, "Midnight is different from Rusty. He's more sensitive. Sometimes he doesn't let me go near him." But she simply nodded in understanding. "He is not angry," she said quietly. "Only unsure." She didn't force herself close. Instead, she stood a few steps away, hands relaxed, breathing slowly. She whispered soft words in her native language, the sound flowing like a steady stream. Midnight's ears turned toward her voice. His restless steps slowed. Caleb watched, amazed. The stallion took a few cautious steps in her direction. Elena reached out her hand, not quickly, but with calm patience. Midnight lowered his head, touching her fingers lightly. Within minutes, he was standing quietly at her side, his large, dark eyes calm, his body no longer tense. Caleb let out a long breath. "I've never seen him that peaceful." Elena stroked the horse's neck gently. "He needs trust before anything else," she said. From that day on, the horses grew easier to handle. Even the ranch hands noticed. They would gather near the barn to watch her work, not to judge, but to learn. Elena didn't give long speeches or complicated instructions. Instead, she taught through examples, small gestures, soft tones, patient breathing. She demonstrated how to read an animal's mood by the movement of its ears or the shift of its weight. Tommy, the youngest worker, followed her everywhere, eager to repeat her techniques. And though he sometimes made mistakes, Elena corrected him kindly. "Move slower," she would say. "Give the horse time to understand you." Or, "Talk softly. They hear your heart before your voice." Her way of teaching was gentle but clear. The workers respected her without hesitation, but her talent didn't stop with horses. One afternoon, as the workers prepared the cattle for routine checks, Elena noticed a cow standing alone. Her head lowered. While the others grazed or wandered calmly, this one didn't move much. Elena approached Caleb and touched his arm lightly. "She is not well." He looked over. "I saw she was slower today, but I thought she was just tired." Elena shook her head. "Her breathing is different, and her eyes look worried." Caleb trusted her instinct by now. He walked with her to the cow and checked more carefully. Sure enough, the animal was showing early signs of an illness that could have spread quickly if left unnoticed. "Good catch," Caleb said, impressed. "You saved us from a bigger problem." Elena lowered her gaze shyly. "I only observed." But Caleb knew better. Many people observed animals every day and saw nothing. Elena saw details others missed. It felt like she carried wisdom older than her years, something formed through deep connection and quiet understanding. Word of her talent began to travel beyond the ranch. One morning, a neighbor named Mrs. Hensley arrived at the ranch gate with a gentle knock on her wagon. Her old mare had grown stubborn, refusing to pull the wagon or follow commands. She had heard from a ranch hand in town that Caleb had someone special helping with horses now. "Is she here?" Mrs. Hensley asked. Caleb nodded, slightly surprised. "You want Elena's help?" "Everyone's talking," the woman said with a smile. "If she can calm that nervous stallion of yours, maybe she can help my Lucy too." When Elena stepped out of the barn, Mrs. Hensley greeted her warmly. "Dear, I hear you have a gift." Elena blushed lightly. "I only try to understand." Mrs. Hensley laughed kindly. "Well, come understand my horse then." It took Elena no more than a few minutes to observe the mare and realize that the animal wasn't stubborn. She was uncomfortable because her harness was too tight on one side. The solution was simple once she found it. Mrs. Hensley left the ranch praising Elena like she had witnessed something magical. Soon after, more people came. Farmers with shy horses, tired cattle, or anxious dogs. They didn't pay much at first, offering small gifts like fresh vegetables, jars of honey, or handmade blankets. But the word continued to spread. People appreciated Elena's kindness and calm nature as much as her talent. Caleb noticed, with both pride and a hint of surprise, how people spoke of Elena with admiration. "She's a blessing," one neighbor said. "A natural," another added. "Your ranch must be lucky to have her," someone remarked. Caleb always smiled gently when he heard that. He knew it was true. With more people coming and the ranch benefiting from Elena's help, Caleb decided to make some changes. He hadn't felt this hopeful since before the drought began. The ranch needed new plans, new life. He gathered the workers one evening near the barn as the sky softened into shades of orange and pink. "We're going to start offering training sessions," he announced. "Not just for our animals, but for anyone who wants to learn. People trust Elena, and we can build something good from it." The workers murmured with excitement. They had not felt this level of motivation in a long time. Elena, hearing her name, looked surprised. "Training sessions? For people?" Caleb nodded. "Yes, you have a gift, Elena. People want to learn from you, and the ranch needs a new source of income. This could help us all." She hesitated. "But I am not a teacher." "You already are," Caleb said softly. "You taught me things I never knew." Her cheeks warmed with gentle embarrassment. "If it helps the ranch, I will try." And try she did. The following weeks brought even more change. Every Wednesday and Saturday, neighbors from all over gathered at the Turner Ranch. Some brought horses, others simply came to watch and learn. Elena demonstrated how to approach animals gently, how to read their moods, and how to practice patience. People listened attentively, often taking notes. Children especially loved her. They followed her like small chicks, asking questions and watching with wide eyes as she worked with the animals. Elena always answered with kindness. Never tiring of their curiosity, the ranch began to earn money again, not a fortune, but enough to repair fences, buy more feed, and finally pay the workers on time. Even the cattle looked healthier, more energetic, as if responding to the new hope spreading across the land. Caleb felt a deep sense of relief every time he looked over the fields and saw busy workers, calm animals, and neighbors smiling. It was as if a long, dry fog had lifted, replaced by something warm and alive. And through all of this, the bond between Caleb and Elena grew quietly but steadily. He found himself seeking her presence without realizing it, walking beside her when she carried buckets, asking her opinion before making decisions, sharing small stories during dinner. She listened with gentle attention, offering warmth in her soft smiles and thoughtful words. For her part, Elena began to speak more about her past, not everything, but small pieces. She told him how she used to watch her father train horses, how she learned to mimic their breathing, how her mother taught her to observe animals with respect. Each story brought them closer, weaving a silent trust between them. Caleb never pushed her for more. He sensed she still carried things she wasn't ready to share. But he didn't mind waiting. Her presence alone brought peace to his days. As summer stretched into its warm, golden weeks, the ranch looked alive again. Visitors came and went. The animals grazed calmly. The workers moved with purpose. And though the challenges of the drought still lingered, the ranch had found hope. Not from rain, not from luck, but from a quiet woman with a hidden talent that touched everything around her. Caleb often stood on the porch at sunset, watching Elena across the yard as she tended to a horse or gathered herbs near the fence. Every time, he felt the same thought rise gently in his heart. Maybe she saved more than the ranch. Maybe she saved him, too. The hottest week of summer arrived quietly but firmly, bringing long days of warm wind and bright sun that made even the strongest workers slow their steps. The Turner Ranch had grown more hopeful in recent months, but the land still carried memories of drought. The grass stayed short. The earth remained dry and cracked at the edges. Caleb knew the ranch wasn't safe yet. It only needed one more challenge to test everything they had rebuilt. That challenge came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, as the sky turned deep shades of orange and purple, a strange stillness settled over the ranch. The air felt heavier than usual, and the wind stopped completely, as if the world were holding its breath. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, looking across the fields with a thoughtful frown. He had lived on this land long enough to recognize these signs. A storm was coming, Not a gentle summer shower, but something stronger, something that carried weight and pressure. The kind of storm that arrived suddenly and could change everything in a matter of minutes. Elena stepped outside beside him, smoothing her apron. She glanced at the sky, then looked at Caleb. The air feels strange. Yes, Caleb said quietly. I don't like it. The workers sensed it too. They moved quickly, gathering tools, closing barn doors, and checking fences. Even the animals acted differently, horses shifting nervously, cattle bunching together more tightly than usual. By the time the first distant rumble echoed across the land, the ranch was already preparing. Storms in this region could blow in fast, and though they rarely lasted long, they sometimes caused trouble, broken fences, scattered cattle, or frightened horses. But this time, the storm arrived with more force than anyone expected. A sudden gust of wind swept across the fields, lifting dust into the air and making the trees tremble. Caleb tightened his jaw. "Everyone inside," he called. "Tie down anything loose. Move the animals to the sheltered side of the barn." The workers hurried. Elena followed Caleb without hesitation as he guided the horses to safety. She calmed them with soft words, even as the wind grew louder. Her presence helped steady the animals, who trusted her more than anyone else. Moments later, the sky opened, not with a gentle rain, but with a powerful rush of wind and thick sheets of water that poured down suddenly, like a curtain falling from the sky. The storm roared, shaking fences and rattling barn doors. The fields flooded quickly, shallow pools forming along the low areas. Caleb checked every corner of the barn, making sure the animals were safe. The workers stayed close behind him, following his instructions. Elena held a trembling horse by its halter, speaking gently until it calmed. Then, through the sound of rushing wind, someone shouted from outside. "The east fence! It's down!" Caleb's stomach tightened. "No, not that fence." The east fence bordered the open grazing land, acres of space with no natural barriers. If the fence really had fallen, the cattle could wander far into the hills, and with the storm so strong, the animals could panic and scatter. One worker rushed in, soaked from the rain. "They're already moving toward the open land. I saw some running for the ridge." Caleb ran his hand over his face. Losing part of the herd would be a disaster. The ranch wasn't strong enough yet to survive such a loss. He turned to Elena. "Stay here. Keep the animals calm. I'll go with the men." But Elena shook her head firmly, her dark eyes steady. "You will need more than strength. You need someone who understands how the animals think." "Elena, the storm... I can help," she said gently. "Please let me." Her voice wasn't loud or forceful, but it carried certainty. Caleb hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He trusted her more than he trusted the storm. The workers gathered horses from the stalls, saddling them quickly. Through the heavy rain and sharp wind, the group rode out into the field. The storm pushed against them with every step, but they kept going. Water rushed across the ground, turning the field into a slick, shifting terrain. The cattle, frightened by the storm, had scattered across the hills. Their dark shapes moved through the rain, confused and restless. Caleb shouted instructions over the storm. "Don't rush them. Keep them together. Guide them slowly." But the wind carried his voice away. Elena rode beside him, leaning close. "They are frightened," she said softly, though the storm roared around them. "If we chase them too quickly, they will run farther." She moved her horse in front of Caleb's, lifting a hand gently. Her movements were calm, unexpectedly calm, given the raging weather. Caleb watched as she closed her eyes briefly, listening to the storm, the wind, the distant sounds of cattle. Then she opened her eyes with quiet certainty. "We must guide them from the left side. The wind is pushing them to the right. If we move against the wind, they will follow us instead of scattering." Caleb nodded. "All right. You lead." Elena rode forward, her horse stepping carefully through the wet ground. She didn't shout or wave her arms wildly. Instead, she used soft clicking sounds and gentle motions, even in the storm. It seemed impossible for the animals to hear her through the wind, but somehow they responded. One by one, the cattle began to slow their movement. They lifted their wet heads, listening. Elena guided them with patience, using her calm energy to draw them inward. The ranch hands moved into position, following her lead. Slowly, very slowly, the herd began to gather. Caleb watched in astonishment. He had seen skilled ranch workers handle cattle for decades, but he had never seen anyone work the way Elena did. Even in the storm, she remained steady. Even in chaos, she created calm. It took more than an hour of careful guiding, circling, and directing, but finally, the herd moved back toward the ranch. The rain softened gradually, then slowed to a drizzle. The storm clouds drifted, leaving the sky dim and heavy, but calmer. By the time they reached the barn, everyone was drenched, exhausted, and covered in mud. But the herd was safe. Every single animal had returned. Caleb climbed off his horse, breathing deeply as relief washed over him. The workers whispered among themselves, amazed by what Elena had done. She slid down from her horse, her hair soaked and her dress clinging to her. Yet her expression was peaceful, as if she had simply completed a quiet task, not saved the entire ranch. Caleb stepped toward her slowly, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Elena, I don't know how you did that." She smiled softly. "I only listened to them." "No," he said gently. "You did much more than that." For a moment, he struggled to find the right words. Elena looked at him patiently, waiting. "You saved this ranch," he said finally. "Truly saved it." The workers nodded, every one of them agreeing silently. Without her, the cattle would have scattered across the land. The ranch would have faced months of searching and losses they couldn't afford, but because of her, everything remained whole. That evening, after the workers rested and the animals settled, Caleb and Elena stood outside the barn. The sky was clearing, showing soft stars peeking through. Caleb turned to her. "Elena, I want you to know something. You didn't only save the ranch today, you've brought life back to this place in so many ways." She lowered her gaze shyly. "I only wanted to be helpful." "You've been more than helpful," he said sincerely. "You've brought hope. You've brought peace. You've taught us things no one else could." He paused, searching her face. "And you've changed my life, Elena." Her breath caught softly. She looked up at him, her eyes warm and gentle. "This ranch has changed mine, too." The quiet between them wasn't empty. It felt full, warm, and honest. The wind whispered softly through the grass. A horse neighed in the distance, as if sensing the peaceful moment. Caleb stepped closer, his voice calm. "I don't know what the future holds, but if it's all right with you, I hope you'll stay by my side. Not because you came here through letters, but because you choose to." Elena's eyes softened. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she offered a small, heartfelt smile. "I choose to," she whispered. The stars shone brighter overhead. The air felt clean after the storm, and the ranch, once struggling, once uncertain, stood strong again. Not because of luck, but because a quiet woman with a hidden talent arrived just when hope seemed lost, and changed everything with patience, kindness, and a heart full of calm strength.